The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. You learn a new word and suddenly you see it in a book, hear it in a song, a friend says it in conversation. You buy a new car and it seems like the same model is on every street. It feels like a strange coincidence, a glitch in the matrix. But what you're experiencing has a name. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Also known as the frequency illusion, this isn't a sign that the universe is sending you a message. It's a fascinating quirk of your own mind. It starts with selective attention. Your brain is constantly filtering a flood of information, and the moment something becomes relevant, like that new word or car, it moves from the background to the foreground. You're not seeing more of it. You're just noticing it more. The second part is confirmation bias. Once you've noticed it that first time, your brain, which loves patterns, actively starts looking for it. Every new sighting feels like proof of a pattern, reinforcing the illusion that this thing is suddenly everywhere. It's a quiet reminder that your perception of reality isn't a perfect recording. It's an active construction. The world might not be changing as much as your awareness is, shifting focus, highlighting details that were always there, waiting for you to finally see them. The ship of Theseus. Imagine an ancient, legendary ship preserved in a harbor as a monument. Over the centuries, its planks rot and are replaced, one by one. After 100 years, every single piece of wood, every nail, every sail has been swapped out. Not a single physical part remains from the original. So, is it still the ship of Theseus? This isn't just a puzzle about a boat. It's a question about the nature of identity itself. If the physical material is entirely new, what makes it the same thing? Is it the design, the name, the continuous history? Now bring the question closer to home. Your body is constantly renewing itself. In just 7 years, almost every cell that makes you has been replaced. The child you once were is physically gone. So what is the thread of continuity? Are you still the same person? Perhaps it's not the planks, but the pattern they form. The relationships, the structure, the memories encoded in the arrangement. Or maybe identity isn't a fixed state but a process, a story we tell about an object or about ourselves, a narrative of persistence through constant change. The ship of Theseus doesn't offer an answer. It invites you to wonder what you really are when every part of you is in a state of quiet, constant flux. Survivorship bias. We look at the ultra-successful, the billionaires, the famous artists, the star athletes, and we study their lives. We read their books, adopt their morning routines, and try to copy their path, believing it's a blueprint for success. But we are missing almost the entire picture. This error in our thinking is called survivorship bias. It's the logical error of focusing only on the examples that survived a process and overlooking those that did not. We see the one startup that made it big, not the thousands of others with the same passionate founders and great ideas that failed silently. We hear about the musician who became a star after years of struggle, but we don't see the millions of equally talented musicians who are still struggling or who gave up. As the saying goes, the ocean is full of sunken ships that had excellent navigators. The stories of failure are often invisible, so our view of reality is dangerously skewed. We overestimate the chances of success and misunderstand what it actually takes. The lesson of survivorship bias is a humbling one. To truly understand any path to success, you must also study the paths of failure. Because the most valuable lessons are often found not in what worked, but in the quiet, vast graveyard of what did not. The overview effect. For all of human history, our view of our world was from the inside. We saw our own field, our own city, our own country. But then, for the first time, a few people left. They looked back, and what they saw changed them forever. This profound shift in awareness is called the overview effect. Astronauts who have seen Earth from the distance of space report a cognitive shift that is difficult to put into words. They describe seeing a fragile, brilliant blue marble suspended in the vast black silence. The borders we fight over, the divisions of nation and ideology are completely invisible. All of human history, every war, every triumph, every life, has happened on this tiny, isolated sphere. The effect is more than intellectual. It's a visceral, emotional realization of unity. It creates a deep sense of care, a need to protect this beautiful, lonely planet and everyone on it. The overview effect shows us that perspective isn't just a mental exercise. It can be a physical vantage point. You don't need to go to space to feel it. You just need to remember that we are all truly riding through the cosmos on the same ship, with no lifeboats in sight. Parkinson's Law. You have a project due in a month. You work on it bit by bit and somehow it fills the entire month. The same project, if it were due tomorrow, would somehow get done by tomorrow. The work didn't change. The time available did. This strange rule of productivity is known as Parkinson's Law. Formally, it states that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. It reveals that time is not a rigid container we fill, but a flexible substance that shapes the work itself. Give a task a loose deadline and it becomes complex, fraught with unnecessary perfectionism and distractions. Force it into a tight container, and your mind focuses on the essential, cutting away everything that doesn't matter. This isn't just about efficiency. It's a truth about human psychology and our relationship with time. We often mistake having more time for being more prepared, when in reality, it can often lead to more anxiety and less decisive action. Parkinson's Law invites you to question your own deadlines. Are they based on the actual scope of the work, or on the space you've arbitrarily given it? It suggests that constraints aren't limitations, but often the very thing that fuels focus and creativity. Time, it turns out, is as much a perception as it is a measurement. The mere exposure effect. A song comes on the radio and at first you don't think much of it, but you hear it again in a coffee shop, then in a friend's car. By the fourth or fifth time you find yourself humming along. You've started to like it. This isn't a coincidence. It's the mere exposure effect. It's a simple, profound principle. The more we're exposed to something, the more we develop a preference for it. Familiarity, in this case, doesn't breed contempt, it breeds comfort and affection. This is why advertising relies on repetition, why a face you see every day can become beautiful to you, and why cultural norms feel so right. Our brains are hardwired to interpret the familiar as safe and the unfamiliar as a potential threat. By simply being present again and again, a thing, an idea, or even a person can cross that mental line from strange to acceptable, and finally, to liked. It's a quiet reminder that our tastes aren't always a product of deep analysis, but often just a record of what we've encountered before. Regression to the mean. You have a truly terrible day. Everything that could go wrong does. The following day you brace for more, but it turns out to be fine, average, or you have an incredible streak of luck, a perfect week. It feels like a new normal, but then things settle back down. This isn't a mystical balance of the universe. It's a simple statistical reality called regression to the mean. In any system with random variation, extreme outcomes are usually followed by more moderate ones. A basketball player who scores a career high one night will likely score closer to their average the next game. A company that has a record-breaking quarter will probably see more typical results after. We are pattern-seeking creatures, so we often attribute this return to average to something we did, a changed strategy, a new ritual. But often, it's just the natural ebb and flow of randomness. The universe has a gravitational pull towards the average. Recognizing this can bring a deep sense of calm, saving us from despair after a low and from hubris after a high. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Imagine a small island in a vast ocean of ignorance. The person standing on the shore, who has just waded a few feet into the water, looks back at the island and feels like a master of the sea. They don't yet know what they don't know. This is the essence of the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a cognitive bias where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. The less you know, the more confident you tend to be, because you lack the very knowledge needed to recognize your own shortcomings. The path to true expertise, however, is humbling. As you learn more, you begin to grasp the immense scope of what you don't understand. This is why experts are often filled with doubt and nuance, while the beginner is brimming with certainty. True wisdom isn't knowing all the answers. It's understanding the depth of the questions and the vast landscape of your own ignorance. The spotlight effect. You walk out of a restroom with a piece of toilet paper stuck to your shoe. You spill a little coffee on your shirt before a meeting. In these moments, it feels as if a spotlight is shining on you and everyone is watching, judging, noticing your every flaw. But they aren't. This is the spotlight effect. It's the psychological phenomenon where we drastically overestimate how much others notice our appearance and behavior. The truth is, everyone is the protagonist of their own story. They are preoccupied with their own perceived missteps, their own anxieties, their own internal monologues. You are a background character in their movie, just as they are in yours. This isn't a cold reality, but a liberating one. The pressure to be perfect, to never make a social mistake, is largely a fiction of our own self-centered perception. You are free to be imperfect, because frankly, most people won't even notice. The paradox of choice. We believe that more freedom and more choices will lead to greater happiness. But stand in front of a wall of 50 different types of toothpaste or 200 streaming TV shows, and you might feel a different emotion: paralysis. This is the paradox of choice. While some choice is essential, an overabundance of options can lead to anxiety, decision fatigue, and less satisfaction with whatever we finally choose. With 10 ice cream flavors, you pick one and enjoy it. With 50, you wonder if the one you didn't pick would have been better. The effort of researching every option becomes a burden, and the potential for regret increases. Unlimited freedom, it turns out, can be its own prison. Constraints and limitations don't always confine us. They can provide a necessary framework that makes choosing easier and the outcome more deeply satisfying. Sometimes, the path to happiness is found not by opening more doors, but by being content with the one you've chosen to walk through. The hedonic treadmill. You work for years striving for that promotion, that new car, that perfect home. You achieve it, and for a moment there's a surge of joy, a feeling of arrival. But then something predictable happens. The feeling fades. The new becomes normal. The excitement settles into a new baseline, and you find yourself looking toward the next goal. This is the hedonic treadmill. It's the human tendency to quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events. We adapt. Our desires escalate in lockstep with our achievements. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature of our psychology, likely evolved to keep us striving, improving, and surviving. But it reveals a profound truth about the nature of fulfillment. Lasting happiness might not be found in the dramatic achievements, but in the quiet spaces between them, in the small, daily practices of gratitude, connection, and presence that the treadmill can't so easily outpace. You're not necessarily chasing joy itself, but the feeling of chasing. Occam's razor. A window is broken, and a baseball is lying in the middle of the room. The simplest explanation is that a child playing outside hit it through the window. It is possible, of course, that a professional baseball player, as part of an elaborate heist, threw the ball from a moving car to create a diversion. But which is more likely? This preference for simplicity is the heart of Occam's razor. The principle, attributed to the 14th century friar William of Ockham, states that among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. Complexity is often seductive. It feels more sophisticated, more intriguing. But the universe, in its fundamental laws, often operates with an elegant simplicity. This isn't a guarantee that the simple answer is always right, but it is a powerful guide. In a world of overwhelming information and convoluted theories, the razor is a tool for cutting through the noise, reminding us that the truth is often hiding in plain sight, unadorned and straightforward. The Peter Principle. In every organization you can find them, people who were once brilliant, competent employees, now struggling in roles where they seem ineffective, overwhelmed. This isn't a coincidence. It's the predictable outcome of the Peter principle. The principle observes that in a hierarchy, people tend to rise to their level of incompetence. You are promoted because you are good at your current job, but the skills needed for one level are not always the skills needed for the next. The great salesperson becomes a mediocre sales manager. The brilliant engineer becomes a frustrated engineering director. And since you typically can't be demoted, you become stuck. The result is that over time, every role tends to be filled by someone who is just competent enough to have been promoted into it, but not necessarily competent enough to excel at it. It's a quiet, systemic flaw built into the very engine of how we organize our work. The butterfly effect. You wake up 5 minutes late because you hit the snooze button. This makes you miss your usual bus. On the next bus, you sit next to a stranger. You strike up a conversation. That conversation leads to a job offer, a cross-country move, a marriage, a family. A single, seemingly insignificant decision, the press of a snooze button, alters the entire trajectory of your life. This is the butterfly effect in action. From chaos theory, it's the concept that small, initial conditions can lead to vast and unpredictable differences in outcomes. A butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could set off a chain of events that culminates in a tornado in Texas. It suggests that the universe is profoundly interconnected and sensitive. Nothing is truly insignificant. Every choice, every chance encounter, every forgotten key or delayed train ripples forward through time in ways we can never fully calculate. It means the future is inherently unpredictable, but it also means that your smallest actions today carry a weight and a potential you will likely never see. The paradox of tolerance. Imagine a society that is completely and unconditionally tolerant. It welcomes all ideas, all beliefs, all forms of speech. Into this society comes a group that is deeply intolerant. They use the society's freedom to spread hatred, to undermine democratic institutions, and to silence others. If the tolerant society does nothing, the intolerant group will eventually grow powerful enough to destroy the very tolerance that allowed it to thrive. This is the paradox of tolerance, articulated by philosopher Karl Popper. It states that unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we are tolerant without limit, even of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be defeated, and tolerance with them. Therefore, to maintain a tolerant society, the society must be intolerant of intolerance. It must be willing to place limits on those who would use freedom to destroy freedom. It is a difficult, uncomfortable truth, revealing that every system, even one built on the purest ideals, contains the seeds of its own contradiction and must actively defend itself. Hanlon's razor. You get cut off in traffic. A colleague forgets to reply to your important email. Your first instinctive reaction is often to assume a negative intent. They're rude. They're disrespectful. They're out to get you. But there is a simple, powerful principle that can dissolve this anger and reframe your entire perspective. Hanlon's razor. It states, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Or, to put it more kindly, by incompetence, by oversight, by simple human error. Most of the slights and inconveniences we experience are not the result of a carefully orchestrated plot against us. They are the result of someone being distracted, overwhelmed, or simply making a mistake. They were careless, not cruel. Incompetence is a far more common force in the world than active conspiracy. Applying this razor to your daily life is like a mental detox. It replaces paranoia with patience, and anger with a quiet, almost amused, understanding of the universal human capacity for error. The Lindy effect. A TikTok trend goes viral and is forgotten in a week. A pop song tops the charts and is replaced in a month. But the plays of Shakespeare, the philosophy of Plato, the recipes for bread, these things are not just old, they are robust. They have a different kind of life expectancy. This is explained by the Lindy effect. It's a concept that suggests the future life expectancy of non-perishable things, like ideas, technologies, or books, is proportional to their current age. If a book has been in print for 100 years, you can expect it to be in print for another 100. If a technology has been used for 1,000 years, it's likely to be used for another 1,000. The longer something has existed, the more it has proven its resilience against the test of time, competition, and changing tastes. New things are fragile, untested. Ancient things have already survived countless threats. The Lindy effect teaches us to look for value not in what is newest, but in what has already endured. The law of triviality. A committee is formed to approve plans for a new nuclear power plant. The meeting agenda has two items: the multi-million-dollar reactor core and the budget for a new bike shed for employees. They spend 2 minutes on the reactor, approving it without discussion. Then, they spend 45 minutes in a heated debate about whether the bike shed should be painted green or blue. This is the law of triviality. It describes the tendency of organizations to give disproportionate weight to trivial issues. Why? Because complex, important problems are intimidating. They require specialized knowledge and carry heavy consequences. Most people feel they have little to contribute. But everyone has an opinion on the color of a bike shed. Small, simple problems are manageable. They make us feel involved, competent, and decisive. So we focus on them, while the truly monumental decisions are rushed through, simply because we lack the capacity or the courage to truly grapple with them. The curse of knowledge. An expert physicist tries to explain quantum mechanics to a beginner and becomes frustrated when they don't grasp it. A seasoned programmer can't understand why a novice struggles with a basic concept. This isn't a failure of intelligence, but a failure of memory. It's the curse of knowledge. It's a cognitive bias where once you know something, it becomes incredibly difficult to imagine what it was like not to know it. Your knowledge has cursed you. The expert can no longer reconstruct the state of mind of the beginner, the confusion, the missing foundational pieces, the steps that now feel automatic. This is why the best teachers are often those who remember their own struggles most vividly. Knowledge, in a cruel twist, can create a form of blindness, building a wall between those who understand and those who are still learning. To communicate effectively, you must first remember the weight of your own ignorance. The Einstellung effect. You face a new problem. Your mind, eager for efficiency, immediately reaches for a solution that has worked for you in the past. It seems to fit. You start applying it. But what if there is a better, more elegant solution, hidden just out of sight? You may never see it because your first idea is blocking the way. This is the Einstellung effect. Einstellung is a German word meaning attitude or setting. It refers to the blinding power of a pre-existing mindset. Your past experience, which is usually your greatest asset, can sometimes become your biggest liability. Your brain, having found a serviceable solution, stops looking for alternatives. The neural pathway is already lit, and it's easier to travel the familiar road than to blaze a new trail. It reveals a subtle trap of expertise. The pattern that made you successful in the past can prevent you from adapting to the unique challenges of the present. To find the best answer, you must first learn to set aside the good one you already have. The availability heuristic. You see a dramatic news report about a shark attack. The next time you step into the ocean, your mind is filled with visions of fins in the water, even though the statistical risk is astronomically low. Why? Because the image is vivid, recent, and terrifying. It's readily available in your mind. This is the availability heuristic. It's a mental shortcut where we estimate the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. We assume that what we can recall easily must be common. Plane crashes feel more frequent than car crashes because they are monumental, newsworthy events. But in reality, you are far more likely to be harmed on your drive to the airport. Our perception of risk, of frequency, of what's normal in the world, is not based on cold statistics, but on the emotional weight and recency of the stories we carry in our heads. Your map of reality is drawn not by data, but by memorable anecdotes. The planning fallacy. Think of the last time you planned a home renovation, a work project, or even a simple trip to the grocery store. Did it take exactly as long as you thought? Or did unexpected delays, complications, and your own optimistic assumptions push the finish line further away? This universal experience has a name: the planning fallacy. It's our consistent and predictable tendency to underestimate the time, costs, and risks of future actions while overestimating the benefits. We plan for the best-case scenario, imagining a straight, smooth path to completion. We fail to account for the traffic jams, the forgotten details, the simple human need for a break. Optimism is our default setting. Reality, with all its friction and chaos, is the constant correction. The planning fallacy isn't a personal failing. It's a feature of human cognition. The only way to counter it is to look at the past, to remember how long similar tasks actually took, and to plan for the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. The Cobra Effect. During British colonial rule in India, the government was concerned about the number of venomous cobras in Delhi. To solve the problem, they offered a bounty for every dead cobra brought to them. Initially, it worked. Cobras were killed and the population decreased. But then, enterprising citizens began to breed cobras, solely to kill them and collect the bounty. When the government became aware of this and scrapped the program, the breeders released their now worthless cobras into the wild. The result: a far larger cobra population than before. This is the Cobra Effect. It describes any situation where an attempted solution to a problem actually makes the problem worse. It happens when we fail to anticipate how people will respond to incentives. A well-intentioned rule, a new policy, a clever fix, all can backfire spectacularly if they don't account for human ingenuity and self-interest. The Cobra Effect is a stark warning. Before you try to solve a complex system, you must first try to understand how it will react. The Streisand Effect. In 2003, the singer Barbra Streisand attempted to suppress aerial photographs of her California mansion, suing the photographer for invasion of privacy. Before her lawsuit, the photo had been downloaded from the website exactly 6 times. After the lawsuit made headlines, it was downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. The attempt to hide the information had, ironically, made it a global sensation. This is the Streisand effect. It's a phenomenon where efforts to censor, hide, or remove a piece of information lead to the unintended consequence of increasing its public visibility and awareness. Trying to silence something is like throwing a stone into a still pond. The ripples of attention spread far and wide. In the digital age, this effect is more powerful than ever. Suppression is often seen as an admission of importance or guilt, fueling public curiosity and the instinct to share. Sometimes, the best way to let something be forgotten is to simply leave it alone. The posthumous bias. A famous artist dies, and suddenly their work skyrockets in value and acclaim. A politician passes away, and their legacy is polished, their flaws softened, their complexities simplified into heroic narratives. This is the posthumous bias, our tendency to judge the dead more favorably than the living. Death acts as a powerful filter. It freezes a person in time, allowing us to selectively remember their achievements while their controversies, mistakes, and personal failings gradually fade from view. We romanticize the past and canonize the departed, turning complex human beings into sanitized symbols. Mortality creates mythology. It's easier to admire a finished story than to grapple with a messy, ongoing one. This bias reminds us that history is not a perfect record, but a story we tell, and our need for heroes often rewrites the complicated truth of a human life. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy. A marksman fires a dozen shots at the side of a barn, creating a random scatter of bullet holes. He then walks up and paints a target around the tightest cluster of holes, proclaiming himself a perfect shot. He didn't aim for a target. He created a target around where the bullets happened to land. This is the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. It's our tendency to ignore the randomness of events and instead cherry-pick patterns after the fact, giving them a false sense of purpose or causation. We see a cluster of cancer cases in a neighborhood and immediately look for an environmental cause, forgetting that random chance naturally creates clusters. We remember the times our dreams seemed to predict an event, forgetting the thousands of times they did not. We are pattern-seeking machines in a universe that is often indifferent and random. The Texas sharpshooter reminds us to be wary of stories that are too neatly constructed after the fact. The focusing illusion. Imagine that moving to California will make you happier because of the sunny weather. When you focus on that idea, the sunshine becomes the single most important factor in your life. But once you live there, you adapt. The sunshine fades into the background, and your happiness is determined by the same things as before: your work, your relationships, your inner state. This is the focusing illusion. As psychologist Daniel Kahneman put it, nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. When we focus on any one aspect of our lives, we exaggerate its importance. A flaw in your appearance, a problem at work, a single negative comment. When it has your attention, it can loom so large it blots out everything else. But your reality is the sum of all its parts. The illusion fades when you shift your focus, revealing that no single thing, good or bad, is as world-defining as it seems in the moment. The sunk cost fallacy. You sit through a terrible movie because you've already paid for the ticket. You stay in a draining relationship because you've invested years. You continue a failing project because you've spent so much money. You are making a decision not based on future value, but on past costs that you can never get back. These are sunk costs. The sunk cost fallacy is our powerful, irrational tendency to continue an endeavor once we have invested money, effort, or time into it, even when the current costs outweigh the benefits. We let the past dictate the future. We feel that quitting would mean wasting all that we've invested, so we throw good time after bad. But the truth is, the money is spent. The time is gone. The only question that matters is, going forward, what is the best choice? Letting go is not a declaration of defeat. It is an act of liberation from a past that no longer serves you. The backfire effect. You have a passionate debate with someone who holds a belief you know is factually wrong. You present them with clear, undeniable evidence. But instead of changing their mind, they dig in their heels. Their belief becomes stronger, more entrenched. You have just witnessed the backfire effect. It's a cognitive bias where corrective information, when presented in a way that threatens a person's worldview or identity, can actually reinforce their original misconception. Facts are not processed in a vacuum. They are filtered through a lens of identity, tribe, and self-concept. To admit they are wrong about a core belief can feel like a personal annihilation. So, the mind defends the belief as it would defend the body, with resistance and counterattacks. This is why facts alone rarely change hearts and minds. Understanding this is the first step toward true communication. The tragedy of the commons. Picture a shared pasture open to all shepherds in a village. It is in each shepherd's rational self-interest to add one more sheep to their flock. The benefit of an extra sheep is entirely theirs. The cost, the slight overgrazing, is shared by everyone. So every shepherd adds one more sheep, and then another. Individually, each decision makes perfect sense. Collectively, they destroy the pasture for everyone. This is the tragedy of the commons. It is an economic problem where individuals, acting independently and rationally according to their own self-interest, behave contrary to the whole group's long-term best interests by depleting a common resource. This logic applies to overfishing the oceans, polluting the atmosphere, or congesting a public road. It reveals a fundamental tension between individual and collective good. What is rational for one is disastrous for all. The tragedy shows us that without careful management, trust, or shared rules, our freedom can become the very instrument of our shared downfall. The Pareto principle. Look at your closet. You probably wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. Look at your work. 80% of your meaningful results likely come from 20% of your most focused efforts. This recurring pattern is known as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. It suggests that in many aspects of life, a small minority of causes, inputs, or efforts lead to a large majority of the results, outputs, or rewards. It's not always a precise 80-20 split, but the underlying truth is consistent. The world is not a 50-50 place. A few key clients generate most of the revenue. A handful of habits shape the quality of your life. A small number of books contain the ideas that truly change you. The principle is an invitation to identify the vital few from the trivial many, to stop spreading your energy evenly across everything, and to focus relentlessly on the small number of things that create an outsized impact. The observer effect. In a physics lab, to measure the position of a subatomic particle, you must bounce a photon off it. But that very act of observation changes the particle's momentum. You can never see it as it truly is, undisturbed. This is the observer effect. It's the principle that the act of observing a system inevitably alters that system. And this concept extends far beyond the quantum world. A manager starts tracking employee productivity, and the employees change their behavior, focusing on what's measured. You set up a camera in a public space, and people become more self-conscious. A child being watched by a parent performs differently than when they are alone. There is no perfectly neutral observation. Your presence, your attention, your very intention to measure, becomes a part of the equation, changing the reality you are trying to see. The law of diminishing returns. The first hour of studying for an exam is intensely productive. The second hour is still useful, but the 10th consecutive hour, you're likely exhausted, retaining almost nothing new. The benefit you gain from each additional unit of effort decreases over time. This is the law of diminishing returns. It states that in any productive process, adding more of one factor of production while holding all others constant will at some point yield lower incremental returns. The first bite of a rich dessert is sublime. The 5th is pleasant. The 10th is cloying. The 20th is nauseating. More is not always better. Every input, whether it's time, money, or effort, has a point of optimal return. Beyond that threshold, you are wasting resources or even causing harm. True wisdom lies not in relentless pushing, but in recognizing the point of enough. The gratification treadmill. You crave a new phone, you get it. There's a rush of satisfaction, a feeling of completion, but it fades quickly, replaced by a new desire for a better car, a bigger house, a different relationship. The cycle repeats. This is the gratification treadmill. It is the relentless cycle of desire, temporary satisfaction, and the immediate emergence of a new desire. Getting what you want doesn't end the process of wanting. It simply resets it at a new level. The satisfaction is always temporary. The desire is perpetual. It's a close cousin of the hedonic treadmill, but focused specifically on the objects of our craving. It reveals that fulfillment cannot be found in the external object itself, but only in our relationship with desire. The treadmill only stops when we choose to step off. The bystander effect. A person collapses on a busy city street. Dozens of people see it happen, yet no one rushes to help immediately. Each person assumes someone else will call for help, someone more qualified will step in. This is the bystander effect. In a crowd, the sense of personal responsibility becomes diffused. The burden of action is shared among all the onlookers, making each individual feel less compelled to intervene. Surely, someone has already called 911, they think. The problem is, everyone is thinking the same thing. The presence of others creates a psychological paralysis. It's a stark reminder that in an emergency, the safest bet is not to assume someone else will act. You must be the one to break the spell of collective inaction, to single yourself out and take responsibility. In a crowd, sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is to stop being a bystander. The halo effect. When you meet someone who is physically attractive, a subtle mental shortcut is activated. You are more likely to assume they are also intelligent, kind, and competent, even without a shred of evidence. This is the halo effect. It's a cognitive bias where our overall impression of a person in one area influences our judgment of their character in other unrelated areas. A single positive trait, like beauty or a prestigious job title, casts a halo that illuminates everything else about them, often obscuring their flaws. It's why brands use celebrities to sell products, and why a polished presentation can overshadow weak content. The halo effect reveals that our judgments are not always careful calculations. They are often swift, emotional impressions, where one shining quality can blind us to a more complex, and perhaps more honest, reality. The pratfall effect. Imagine a brilliant, impeccably dressed CEO giving a flawless presentation. They seem impressive but also distant, almost superhuman. Then they accidentally knock over their glass of water. After a moment of flustered apology, something shifts. The audience warms to them. They seem more human, more relatable. This is the pratfall effect. It's the phenomenon where people who are perceived as highly competent can become more likable and approachable after making a small, relatable mistake. The stumble, the blunder, the pratfall breaks the illusion of perfection. It makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is the gateway to trust and connection. We are intimidated by perfection, but we connect with humanity. Your flaws don't make you weak, they make you real. And in a world of curated perfection, being real is a rare and valuable currency. The imposter syndrome paradox. You achieve a significant accomplishment, but instead of feeling proud, you feel like a fraud. You're convinced you fooled everyone and that you'll be exposed at any moment. Ironically, this feeling is most common among highly capable, high-achieving people. This is the imposter syndrome paradox. Those who are genuinely incompetent often lack the self-awareness to recognize their own shortcomings, leading to unwavering confidence. But the more you know, the more you become aware of the vast ocean of what you don't know. Expertise opens the door to nuance and complexity, where few things are black and white. This self-doubt, this feeling of being an imposter, is not a sign of inadequacy. It is often the quiet, humming engine of a conscientious mind. It's the price of awareness, and in many cases, a marker of true competence. The effort justification. You spend months building a piece of furniture from a kit of hundreds of wooden pieces. It's frustrating, tedious work. When you finally place the finished bookcase in your room, you don't see its minor imperfections. You see a masterpiece you created with your own hands. You value it far more than a similar, store-bought shelf. This is effort justification. It's a cognitive bias where we attribute greater value to an outcome we had to work hard for, precisely because we had to work hard for it. The difficulty of the journey becomes part of the reward. This is why initiation rituals build strong group loyalty and why difficult projects foster deep pride. The brain rationalizes the effort expended by increasing the perceived value of the goal. An easy victory can feel hollow, but a hard-won achievement, no matter how small, is transformed by the struggle into a treasure. The frequency illusion. You learn the word sonder, the realization that every random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. The next day, you see it in a novel. The day after, a friend uses it in conversation. It feels like the word has suddenly erupted into the world. But the word and the concept were always there. Your brain has just started noticing it. This is the frequency illusion. It begins the moment something becomes relevant to you. Your brain's reticular activating system, a kind of mental filter, starts prioritizing it, plucking it from the background noise of your life. It's not that the world has changed. Your perceptual filter has. You are now tuned to a different frequency. It's a gentle reminder that you don't see the world as it is. You see a world that is selectively highlighted by your own focused attention, interests, and recent experiences. The Zygarnik effect. You're halfway through a gripping novel, or a project at work is left incomplete for the day. You find that your mind keeps circling back to it, the unfinished task creating a subtle but persistent mental itch. This is the Zeigarnik effect. It's the psychological tendency to remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. Your brain, in its drive for closure and resolution, holds on to these open loops, keeping them active in your working memory. It's the reason a cliffhanger in a TV show is so effective, and why it's hard to stop thinking about an unresolved argument. The mind seeks completion. Once a task is finished, the mental file is closed and the cognitive resources are freed. This is also the secret to productivity. Starting, even if you can't finish, because the very act of beginning creates a psychological pull that draws you back to see it through. The law of unintended consequences. A new law is passed to improve safety, but it inadvertently makes a product so expensive that people can no longer afford it. A powerful antibiotic is developed to save lives, but its overuse leads to drug-resistant superbugs. This is the law of unintended consequences. It states that the actions of people, and especially of governments, always have effects that are unanticipated or unintended. We intervene in complex systems with a specific goal in mind, but we can never account for all the ripple effects. The internet was designed to share information. It also created new avenues for misinformation. The automobile granted unprecedented freedom. It also reshaped our cities and our climate. Every solution, no matter how well-intentioned, contains the seeds of new problems. It is a humbling reminder of the limits of our foresight in an impossibly interconnected world. The anchoring bias. You walk into a store and see a watch priced at $2,000. Next to it, you see a similar watch for $500. The $500 watch suddenly seems incredibly reasonable. But if you had seen that same $500 watch next to one for $100, it would feel extravagant. This is the anchoring bias. It's our tendency to rely too heavily on the very first piece of information we receive, the anchor, when making decisions. Once an anchor is set, all subsequent judgments are made in relation to it. The initial price, the first salary offer, the starting point in a negotiation. These numbers set the stage for everything that follows, warping our perception of value and fairness. The anchor, even if it's completely arbitrary, creates a context that our mind struggles to ignore. Value is not absolute. It is a story told by comparison. The decoy effect. You're at a movie theater. A small popcorn costs $4. A large costs $7. You might hesitate. Then you see a third option, a medium popcorn for $6.50. Suddenly, the large seems like the obvious, smart choice. The medium popcorn is a decoy. The decoy effect is a phenomenon in marketing where consumers tend to change their preference between two options when presented with a third, asymmetrically dominated option. The decoy is priced to make one of the other options look significantly more attractive. Nobody is expected to buy the medium. Its only job is to make the large look like a fantastic deal. This is choice architecture in action. Our decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are shaped by the carefully crafted landscape of options presented to us, where some choices exist not to be chosen, but to guide you toward the one that is. The false consensus effect. You hold a strong political or social belief, and you instinctively feel that most reasonable people must agree with you. You overestimate how common your own beliefs, habits, and opinions are in the wider population. This is the false consensus effect. We are naturally drawn to people who are similar to us, and we consume media that reinforces our existing views. This creates a social and informational echo chamber. Inside this chamber, our beliefs feel normal, mainstream, and self-evident. It becomes difficult to even imagine that intelligent, well-meaning people could see the world differently. We mistake the sound of our own echo for the voice of the world. This bias is a powerful engine of polarization. reminding us that our personal reality is a small, curated sample of a much larger and more diverse human experience. The gambler's fallacy. You watch a coin land on heads 5 times in a row. The sixth time, you feel a deep intuitive certainty that tails is due. It has to balance out, but the coin has no memory. Each flip is an independent event, untouched by the flips that came before. This is the gambler's fallacy. It's the mistaken belief that if something happens more frequently than normal during a given period, it will happen less frequently in the future, or vice versa. We see patterns in randomness and expect the universe to correct itself, to be fair. But probability has no sense of justice. A run of bad luck does not make good luck more likely. The roulette wheel does not remember that red has come up 10 times. The universe operates on chance, not on karma, and recognizing this can free you from the illusion of debts owed and paybacks due. The endowment effect. You are given a simple coffee mug. After you've held it for a moment, it becomes your mug. If someone offers to trade you for an identical mug, you're likely to demand a higher price to give yours up than you would have been willing to pay for it in the first place. This is the endowment effect. It's the cognitive bias where we ascribe more value to things merely because we own them. Ownership, even temporary possession, creates an irrational attachment. The object is no longer just an object. It becomes part of our story, our identity. We see this in our reluctance to sell heirlooms for their market price, or to declutter a home full of possessions we never use. The value is not in the item itself, but in the psychological weight of possession. We don't just own our things. In a very real sense, they come to own a part of us. The peekend rule. You go on a 2-week vacation. For 13 days, it's pleasant but unremarkable. On the 14th day, you have a breathtaking, magical experience. The journey home is smooth and easy. How do you remember the vacation? You will likely judge it almost entirely by that one peak moment and the calm ending. This is the peekend rule. When we recall past experiences, we don't average out every moment of pleasure and pain. Instead, we heavily weight our memory on 2 data points: the most intense moment, the peak, whether good or bad, and how it ended. A long, painful medical procedure with a gentle, gradual decline in pain is remembered as better than a shorter, less painful procedure that ends abruptly. Our memory is not a perfect recording. It is an editor that creates a highlight reel, and the final clip holds disproportionate power. The confirmation bias loop. You form a belief, perhaps that a certain political party is corrupt. From that moment on, you notice every news story, every anecdote that confirms this view. You readily accept this information. Meanwhile, you dismiss, ignore, or explain away any evidence to the contrary. Your belief grows stronger, making you even more selective in what you accept. This is the confirmation bias loop. It is the mother of all cognitive biases. Our tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. Your worldview becomes a fortress, and you only open the gates for supplies that feed the garrison inside. You don't see reality as it is. You see a reality that has been filtered to match what you already expect to see. Breaking this loop requires active, conscious effort to seek out disconfirming evidence, to willingly challenge your own most cherished assumptions. The illusion of control. A basketball player on a hot streak feels that his special pre-shot routine is causing the ball to go in. An investor believes their meticulous research gives them an edge in an unpredictable market. You press the elevator button repeatedly, convinced it will make the car arrive faster. This is the illusion of control. It's our tendency to overestimate our ability to control events that are largely determined by chance or complex systems. We have a deep-seated need to believe we are the pilots of our lives, so we invent causality where none exists. We attribute successes to our skill and failures to bad luck. This illusion can be comforting, giving us a sense of agency in a chaotic world. but it can also lead to poor decisions and unnecessary stress. True wisdom lies in accurately discerning what we can control, our efforts, our attitudes, our responses, and gracefully accepting the vast, swirling chaos of everything else. The isolation effect. Think of a sea of gray circles. Now imagine one bright red square in the middle. Which one will you remember? The red square, of course. This is the isolation effect, also known as the von Restorff effect. It's the tendency for an item that stands out from its surroundings to be more likely to be remembered than other items. Your brain is a filter, and it prioritizes novelty, strangeness, and difference. This is why the most eccentric character in a story stays with you, why a single moment of profound awkwardness in an otherwise ordinary day can replay in your mind for years, and why unique marketing catches your eye. The ordinary fades into a blur, but the unusual, the outlier, the thing that breaks the pattern, is granted a special kind of permanence in your memory. The just world hypothesis. You see a successful person and assume they are hardworking and virtuous. You see someone suffering and wonder what they did to deserve it. This isn't necessarily cold-hearted. It's a psychological coping mechanism known as the just world hypothesis. It's the deep-seated need to believe that the world is fundamentally fair, that people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. This belief is a comforting lie that helps us feel safe and in control. If we are good and careful, we reason, bad things won't happen to us. But the universe is indifferent. Tragedy strikes at random. Luck, both good and bad, is distributed without regard for merit. Accepting this randomness is frightening, but it is also the foundation of true empathy and a more accurate, if less comforting, view of reality. The normalcy bias. As floodwaters rise, some residents refuse to evacuate, insisting, "It's never been this bad before." When a crisis looms, our minds often downplay the threat, clinging to the belief that things will continue as they always have. This is the normalcy bias. It's our brain's tendency to underestimate the possibility of a disaster and its effects. We assume that since a catastrophic event hasn't happened to us yet, it never will. It can't happen here. It won't happen to me. This bias is a psychological shield against anxiety, allowing us to function without constant fear. But it can also be a trap, leading to a lack of preparation and a dangerous delay in reaction when the unlikely becomes real. We are wired for continuity, but the world is capable of abrupt and discontinuous change. The ostrich effect. A stack of unopened medical bills sits on the counter. A notification from your bank account goes ignored. A difficult conversation with a partner is continually postponed. This is the ostrich effect, the tendency to avoid potentially negative financial or psychological information by simply sticking our heads in the sand. We operate under the flawed logic that if we don't look at a problem, it doesn't exist, or at least it can't hurt us. But the opposite is true. The bill's late fee will still accrue. The bank account will still be overdrawn. The relationship issue will fester. Avoiding information might provide short-term relief from anxiety, but it guarantees long-term consequences. What you don't see can and will hurt you. Courage is often just the simple act of looking at what you're most afraid to see. The projection bias. You're shopping for groceries while hungry and come home with far more food than you need. You assume that your future self, who will not be hungry, will want all the same snacks. This is the projection bias. It's our tendency to unconsciously assume that others share our current thoughts, beliefs, and values. More than that, we project our current state onto our future selves. We believe that what we want now is what we will always want. We underestimate how much our preferences, moods, and circumstances will change over time. This is why we make commitments we later regret, and why we struggle to understand the actions of people who are in a different emotional or situational place than we are. We are all trapped in the present moment, projecting its light and shadows onto everyone and every when. The recency bias. You reflect on your entire year, but the memory that feels most vivid, most defining, is the event that happened just last week. A recent argument carries more emotional weight than years of harmony. This is the recency bias. It's our tendency to weigh the latest information more heavily than older data. Our minds are not perfect archivists, they are present-biased curators. The now always shouts, while the past whispers. This is why a single piece of bad news can overshadow a month of good news, and why the final impression someone leaves is often the one that sticks. Memory has a half-life, and the most recent experiences have not yet begun to decay. We don't live our lives in years. We live them in a series of powerful, fleeting nows that constantly reshape our entire past. The restraint bias. You walk into a grocery store after a meal, confident you can resist the allure of the junk food aisle. You believe that tomorrow, you will have the willpower to start that difficult project, to resist checking your phone, to say no to temptation. This is the restraint bias. It is our tendency to overestimate our capacity for self-control. We believe we are stronger, more disciplined, and less susceptible to impulse than we actually are. We make plans for a future version of ourselves who is a paragon of virtue, forgetting that this future self will be tired, stressed, and human, just like our present self. Everyone thinks they are the exception to the universal pull of human weakness. Understanding this bias is the first step toward true self-management, building systems and environments that support our goals, because we can no longer trust our future resolve. The spacing effect. You can cram for an exam, stuffing information into your brain over one long, painful night. You might even pass, but a week later, almost everything will be gone. If instead you had studied the same material for shorter periods over several weeks, it would have woven itself into the fabric of your long-term memory. This is the spacing effect. It is the psychological phenomenon where information is better retained when study sessions are spaced out over time, rather than massed into a single session. Cramming creates a fragile, temporary structure. Spaced repetition builds a durable, lasting one. Your brain doesn't just store information while you're learning. It consolidates and strengthens memories during the rest periods between learning. Forgetting is not the enemy of learning. It is a crucial part of the process. True mastery requires not just effort, but patience and the strategic use of time itself. The paradox of thrift. During an economic downturn, it seems like the most rational thing for an individual to do is to save money, to cut back on spending, to build a safety net. But if everyone does this simultaneously, demand for goods and services plummets. Businesses fail, unemployment rises, and the recession deepens. What is prudent for a single person becomes catastrophic for the whole economy. This is the paradox of thrift. It is a classic example of the fallacy of composition. What is true for a part is not necessarily true for the whole. Individually rational decisions, when aggregated, can create a collectively irrational and destructive outcome. It reveals a fundamental tension between personal responsibility and collective well-being, showing that the right choice cannot always be made in isolation. The system itself has a logic that often overrules the logic of its individual parts. The nocebo effect. You are given a sugar pill and told it is a powerful drug that may cause headaches and nausea as a side effect. Even though the pill is pharmacologically inert, you soon develop a pounding headache and feel nauseous. This is the nocebo effect. It is the dark twin of the placebo effect. While a placebo can trigger healing through positive belief, a nocebo can create illness through negative expectation. Your mind, armed with fear and anticipation, can manifest the very symptoms it dreads. It demonstrates that the line between the mind and the body is not just permeable, it is often non-existent. Belief is not just a thought, it is a powerful biological agent. What we fear, we empower. What we expect, we often invite into being for better or for worse. The illusion of transparency. You stand up to give a presentation, your heart pounding, your palms sweaty. You are certain that everyone in the room can see your anxiety, that your nervousness is on full display. But in reality, most people perceive far less than you think they do. This is the illusion of transparency. It's the cognitive bias that leads us to overestimate how much others can discern our internal states. We feel our own emotions so vividly that we assume they are leaking out, obvious to anyone paying attention. But your inner world is largely private. The slight tremor in your voice that sounds like a scream to you is often just a whisper to others. Your lies feel more transparent than they are, your intentions less clear. You are the star of your own movie, but to everyone else you are often just a background character. This can be a profound relief. You are far more opaque, and therefore far more free than you imagine. The self-serving bias. When you succeed, you credit your own talent, hard work, and intelligence. When you fail, you blame external factors, bad luck, unfair circumstances, or other people's mistakes. This is the self-serving bias. It's a protective mechanism for our ego. By taking credit for our victories, we bolster our self-esteem. By externalizing our failures, we shield it from damage. You win the game because you're skilled. You lose because the referee was biased. This bias helps us get out of bed in the morning, but it distorts our understanding of reality and stunts our growth. It prevents us from learning from our mistakes and acknowledging the role of luck in our successes. Ego, it seems, will always choose a comforting lie over a difficult truth. The ambiguity effect. You are offered two choices. The first, a guaranteed $50. The second, a coin flip where you could win $100 or nothing, but the coin is from a strange, foreign country and you're not sure if it's fair. Most people will take the certain $50. This is the ambiguity effect. It's our tendency to avoid options where the probability of a favorable outcome is unknown. We prefer a known small reward over an uncertain large reward. We fear the unknown more than we fear a known negative. This is why we stick with familiar brands, avoid foreign investments, and are wary of situations where the rules are unclear. Our brains are risk-averse when it comes to ambiguity, often preferring the comfort of a clear, if suboptimal, path over the anxiety of a potentially better, but uncertain, one. The conjunction fallacy. Linda is 31, single, outspoken, and deeply concerned with social justice. Which is more probable? A. Linda is a bank teller. B. Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. Logically, option A must be more probable, as it includes all bank tellers, including feminist ones. Yet, most people choose B. This is the conjunction fallacy. It's the mistaken belief that a specific, detailed scenario is more likely than a general one. The vivid, coherent story about Linda feels more right, so our intuition overrides logic. Details, even if they make a story more plausible, always make it less probable. Our minds are drawn to compelling narratives, and a good story can feel more true than a broad, bland statistical reality. The fundamental attribution error. Another driver cuts you off in traffic. Your immediate thought is that they are a reckless, selfish person. But when you cut someone off, it's because you were distracted, you're in a hurry for an important reason, or you simply didn't see them. This is the fundamental attribution error. It's our tendency to overemphasize personality-based explanations for the behavior of others while overemphasizing situational explanations for our own behavior. For others, we attribute actions to their character. For ourselves, we attribute actions to our circumstances. We are the complex heroes of our own stories, with understandable motives and external pressures. Everyone else is a simple character, defined by their actions. This error is a major source of misunderstanding and conflict, a reminder that we are all quick to judge the actor on the stage, forgetting the set, the script, and the stage directions that guide their performance. The reactance effect. A sign says, "Wet paint do not touch." What is your first impulse? For many, it's a sudden, almost magnetic urge to reach out a finger and test it. This is the reactance effect. It's a psychological reaction against rules or attempts to restrict personal freedoms. When we feel our choices are being limited or controlled, we experience a motivational drive to reclaim that freedom. The forbidden becomes more desirable simply because it is forbidden. This is why teenagers rebel against strict parents, why censorship often backfires and amplifies interest, and why limited time offers are so effective. An attempt to control can, paradoxically, breed the very rebellion it seeks to prevent. We are hardwired to resist being told what to do, even when the command is in our own best interest. The Weber-Fechner law. If you are holding a 1-pound weight and someone adds another pound, you will definitely notice the difference. But if you are holding a 50-pound weight and someone adds a single pound, you likely won't feel a change. This is the Weber-Fechner law. It describes the relationship between the actual change in a physical stimulus and the perceived change. Our perception works on a logarithmic, not a linear, scale. We notice changes in proportion to the intensity of the original stimulus. This applies to sound, light, weight, and even money. Losing $100 hurts much more when you have $1,000 than when you have $1 million. Our sensory and emotional experience of the world is not about absolute values, but about relative differences. The universe may be absolute, but our perception of it is always and only relative. The serial position effect. Try to memorize a random list of words. When you try to recall them later, you will most easily remember the words at the very beginning of the list and the words at the very end. The words in the middle will be a blur. This is the serial position effect. It is composed of two parts. The primacy effect, where we best remember the first items, they have the most time to be transferred to long-term memory, and the recency effect, where we best remember the last items, they are still fresh in our short-term memory. This is why first impressions are so powerful and enduring, and why the final moment of an experience, a conversation, a movie, a vacation, disproportionately colors our memory of the whole event. Our memory is not a faithful recorder. It is a storyteller that emphasizes the opening and the closing, often at the expense of the entire middle act. The herd mentality. You see a crowd of people suddenly start running in a city square. Without knowing why, you feel a primal urge to run too. You hear that everyone is investing in a certain stock, so you buy in, fearing you'll miss out. This is the herd mentality. It's our instinct to conform to the behaviors and opinions of a group. For most of human history, following the herd was a survival strategy. If the tribe was fleeing, there was probably a predator. But in the modern world, this ancient instinct can lead to irrational panics, financial bubbles, and the stifling of individual thought. Safety in numbers can quickly become panic in numbers. The herd does not stop to ask if it is running towards something or away from nothing. It just runs. And following it can sometimes lead the entire group right over a cliff. The illusion of asymmetric insight. You listen to your friends argue, and you can clearly see the biases and flaws in their logic. You feel you understand their motivations better than they understand each other's, and certainly better than they understand yours. You believe your perspective is uniquely objective. This is the illusion of asymmetric insight. It's the belief that we understand others better than they understand us, and better than they understand themselves. We have access to all of our own complex internal reasoning, but we only see others' external actions. This leads us to conclude that our insight into them is deep, while their view of us is shallow. The truth is, everyone is trapped inside their own skull, and everyone believes they are the one who truly sees the world clearly. It is a universal, shared delusion of unique objectivity. We are all blind to our own blindness. The Google effect. You need a friend's phone number. A decade ago, you might have memorized it. Today, you simply search your contacts. You need a fact for a debate. You don't recall it from memory, you pull out your phone. This is the Google effect, or digital amnesia. It's the tendency to forget information that can be easily found online. Our brains, in their relentless efficiency, are offloading the work of rote memorization to our digital devices. Your phone has become a seamless extension of your memory. The result is a trade-off. We know less in our own heads, but we have instant access to infinitely more. We are becoming curators of information rather than repositories, experts in navigation rather than retention. It's a fundamental shift in human cognition. We are remembering the where, not the what. The narrative fallacy. A company's stock price rises for a week. Pundits immediately craft a story. The new CEO's bold strategy is paying off. The price then falls. The story is revised. Investors are realizing the strategy is too risky. We do this with our own lives, connecting random events into a coherent, causal storyline. This is the narrative fallacy. Our brains are allergic to randomness and chaos. We have a deep-seated need to weave scattered events into a meaningful plot with causes and effects. We find purpose in coincidence and see intention in accident. But the universe does not always tell stories. Often, things just happen. The narrative fallacy comforts us, giving us the illusion of understanding and control in a world that is frequently unpredictable and senseless. We are storytelling animals, imposing plots on a plotless reality. The Diderot effect. The philosopher Denis Diderot wrote of receiving a beautiful new robe. While splendid, it made his existing clothes look shabby in comparison. So he replaced them. Then his furniture looked dated, so he bought new pieces. One new possession created a cascade of consumption. This is the Diderot effect. A single new acquisition can disrupt the equilibrium of your belongings, making everything else seem inadequate by comparison. The new shirt doesn't go with your old shoes, so you buy new shoes. The new shoes demand new pants. This spiral of consumption is driven by a desire for coherence, for our possessions to tell a consistent story about who we are. Acquisition is contagious. One purchase can quietly justify the next, creating a chain reaction of spending in the pursuit of a harmony that is always just one more purchase away. The Lake Wobegon effect. In the fictional town of Lake Wobegon, all the women are strong, all the men are good-looking, and all the children are above average. This is not just a joke, it's a psychological reality. The vast majority of people believe they are above average in intelligence, driving skill, ethics, and likability. This is the Lake Wobegon effect. It's a type of optimistic bias where we overestimate our own abilities and qualities relative to others. Statistically, it is impossible for most people to be above average. Yet, our ego performs this mathematical impossibility with ease. We compare ourselves not to a true average, but to a flawed caricature, ensuring we always come out on top. This bias protects our self-esteem, but it can also blind us to our very real weaknesses and the need for improvement. The primacy effect. In a job interview, the candidate makes a strong, confident first impression. That initial positive data point becomes the lens through which all their subsequent answers are viewed. Minor stumbles are forgiven. Conversely, a weak start is an anchor that drags down everything that follows. This is the primacy effect. It's our tendency to better remember and be more influenced by the first pieces of information we encounter in a sequence. Initial data points form a schema, a mental framework that shapes how we interpret all later information. We are cognitive misers, and once we've formed an initial impression, we are reluctant to expend the energy to change it. The beginning of any sequence, a list, a meeting, a relationship, holds a power that is disproportionate and often decisive. First impressions are not just lasting, they are formative. The recency effect's twin. A long, pleasant dinner with friends is marred by a single, sharp comment at the very end. That final moment, the last data point, can disproportionately color your memory of the entire evening. This is the recency effect, the powerful twin of the primacy effect. While the primacy effect states that first impressions are crucial, the recency effect reveals that final impressions are equally, if not more, potent. The most recent information we receive is the freshest in our minds, and it often carries undue weight in our overall judgment. This is why a brilliant presentation with a weak conclusion is remembered as mediocre, and why a difficult project with a smooth finish is recalled more fondly. The ending of any experience writes the final sentence in the story we tell ourselves about it. You must not only start strong, you must finish strong or risk being misremembered. The action bias. In a tense soccer match, a goalkeeper facing a penalty kick has a choice: dive left, dive right, or stay in the center. Statistically, staying in the center is the most optimal strategy. Yet goalkeepers almost always dive. Doing something feels better than doing nothing, even when nothing is the smarter choice. This is the action bias. It's our innate preference for action over inaction, even when there is no evidence that action will lead to a better outcome. We feel that motion is synonymous with progress. This is why doctors may prescribe unnecessary antibiotics, why investors overtrade their portfolios, and why we feel compelled to intervene in situations where patience would serve us better. Inaction can feel like helplessness, while action, even futile action, restores our sense of agency. We would rather be seen as actively wrong than passively powerless. The blind spot bias. You can easily list the cognitive biases that afflict your friends, your colleagues, even strangers. You can see how their confirmation bias narrows their view, or how their self-serving bias protects their ego. But what about your own biases? The truth is, you likely believe you are largely free of them. This is the blind spot bias. It's the cognitive bias of recognizing the impact of biases on the judgment of others, while failing to see the impact of biases on one's own judgment. Everyone thinks they are the exception. Everyone believes their own perception is clear and objective, but the eye cannot see its own lens. We are all looking at the world through a unique filter of experiences and predispositions, and the most dangerous filter is the one you don't know is there. True self-awareness begins with the humbling admission that you, too, are deeply biased. The cheerleader effect. A group of people walks into a room. From a distance, they all seem remarkably attractive. But as you look at each individual more closely, you notice that some are quite ordinary looking. This phenomenon has a name: the cheerleader effect. It's the cognitive bias where individuals appear more attractive when they are in a group than when they are alone. Our brains, when viewing a group, tend to perceive the average of all the faces rather than focusing on the specific features of any one person. Individual flaws, a slightly asymmetrical nose, a weak chin, get smoothed out in this mental averaging process. The crowd creates a kind of composite beauty, a statistical illusion that makes everyone in it benefit from the collective glow. It's a reminder that context is everything, and sometimes beauty is not an individual trait, but an emergent property of a group. The curse of dimensionality. Imagine trying to find people with tastes identical to yours if you only consider their favorite color. You might find many matches. Now, add their favorite movie, book, food, and 100 other preferences. The more criteria you add, the fewer perfect matches you will find. In fact, in a high-dimensional space, every person becomes equally, uniquely distant from every other. This is the curse of dimensionality. It's a principle from mathematics and computer science that states that as the number of features or dimensions increases, the volume of the space increases so fast that the available data becomes sparse. This makes finding patterns or similarities incredibly difficult. More data does not always mean more clarity. It can create more distance and complexity. In life, the more factors you use to judge, compare, or categorize, the more you will see how truly unique and isolated every single thing, and every single person, really is. The moral credential effect. You donate to an environmental charity, and for a moment you feel virtuous. Later that day, you take a long, hot shower, leave the lights on in an empty room, and order a disposable takeout meal without a second thought. The good deed has, in your mind, earned you the right to be a little less good. This is the moral credential effect. It's a cognitive bias whereby past moral behavior can license later immoral or unethical behavior. It's as if we maintain a kind of moral bank account. A deposit of virtue gives us psychological permission to make a withdrawal. We use our own good actions as credentials that prove we are a good person, which then allows us to relax our standards without damaging our self-image. One kind act can become a free pass for indulgence, making our overall morality less consistent, not more. The outcome bias. A CEO makes a risky business decision based on the best available data at the time. The decision fails due to an unforeseeable market crash. We judge the CEO as incompetent. Another CEO makes a reckless gamble based on a gut feeling, and through sheer luck it pays off. We hail them as a visionary. This is the outcome bias. It is the tendency to evaluate the quality of a decision based on its outcome, rather than on the process and information that informed the decision at the time it was made. We are terrible at separating luck from skill. A good process can lead to a bad outcome, and a terrible process can lead to a good one. The outcome bias rewrites history, making wise strategists look like fools and lucky fools look like geniuses. It teaches us to judge our own choices, and those of others by the logic of the moment, not the tyranny of the result. The placebo effect's reach. A patient is given a sugar pill and told it is a powerful painkiller. Their pain diminishes. A surgeon performs a fake operation, making an incision but doing nothing else, and the patient's knee heals. This is not magic. It is the well-documented and profound power of the placebo effect. It demonstrates that belief alone can trigger measurable, real physiological changes in the body. The mind, expecting healing, can release endorphins, reduce inflammation, and mobilize the immune system. The ritual of treatment, the white coat, the pill, the syringe, can itself be therapeutic. The placebo effect reveals that the line between the psychological and the physical is an illusion. Your expectations are not just thoughts, they are active participants in your biology. Belief, it turns out, is one of the most potent medicines we have. The pratfall's reverse. A respected, competent leader spills coffee on their shirt during a meeting. The room chuckles and they become more relatable and likable. Now, imagine a struggling, incompetent employee does the exact same thing. The reaction is different. Eye rolls, silent judgment, a reinforced perception of their clumsiness. This is the reverse of the pratfall effect. The original effect, where a mistake makes a competent person more likable, only works if you are already perceived as capable. Your blunder then serves to humanize you, to break the intimidating facade of perfection. But if you are already seen as incompetent, a mistake doesn't make you relatable. It confirms the negative perception. Mistakes humanize the strong, but they often bury the weak. It's a cruel but revealing truth about the conditional nature of our empathy and judgment. The rhyme's reason effect. Consider the saying, "What sobriety conceals, alcohol reveals." It sounds insightful, almost poetic. Now consider the same idea without the rhyme. Drunk people show their true feelings. It feels less profound, less true. This is the rhyme as reason effect. It is a cognitive bias where statements that rhyme are perceived as more accurate and truthful than non-rhyming statements. The musicality and fluency of a rhyming phrase make it easier for our brains to process, and we misinterpret this processing fluency for truth. We are seduced by the form, and that seduction spills over into our judgment of the content. A well-turned phrase, a catchy slogan, a rhyming proverb. They all carry an unearned air of wisdom, proving that we don't just judge an idea by its merit, but by its packaging. The third-person effect. You see a political advertisement and think, that might sway undecided voters, but it doesn't affect me. You scroll past a social media post and believe its misinformation will fool others, but your own judgment is sound. This is the third-person effect. It's the pervasive belief that mass media messages have a greater effect on others than on oneself. Everyone assumes they are the critical thinker, the immune one, while the masses are easily influenced. This bias creates a dangerous blind spot. It allows us to underestimate how subtly our own attitudes are shaped by the media we consume, from advertising to news to entertainment. We are all swimming in the same cultural water, and no one is as dry as they think they are. Recognizing this is the first step toward truly critical consumption. The von Restorff effect. Presented with a list of words, cat, dog, horse, piano, bird, fish, which one are you most likely to remember? The word piano stands out. It is distinct. This is the von Restorff effect, the formal name for the isolation effect. It states that an item that stands out from its peers is more likely to be remembered than the others. Your brain is a filter for novelty, and it grants a memory advantage to anything that breaks a pattern. This is why the one red tulip in a field of yellow is so striking, why a single moment of profound silence in a noisy party is so powerful, and why being different, in any context, is a strategy for being remembered. In a world of sameness, distinctiveness is a form of cognitive immortality. The Hawthorne effect. In the 1920s, researchers studied worker productivity at a Hawthorne plant. They found that productivity improved whenever they changed the lighting, whether they made it brighter or dimmer. The workers weren't responding to the light itself, but to the fact that they were being studied. This is the Hawthorne effect. It's a phenomenon whereby individuals modify or improve an aspect of their behavior in response to their awareness of being observed. The simple act of paying attention to people changes them. This has profound implications in workplaces, schools, and even in our personal relationships. When we know we are being watched, we perform. We conform to what we believe is expected. Observation is not a passive act. It is an intervention that alters the very system it is trying to measure. The identifiable victim effect. A news report shows a single named child stranded and alone after a disaster. Donations pour in. Another report cites statistics, 10,000 children displaced. The response is more muted despite the vastly larger scale of the tragedy. This is the identifiable victim effect. We are emotionally driven to help a single, specific, identifiable individual, but our compassion fails when faced with a large, abstract statistic. One person with a face and a story feels real. 1,000 is just a number. Our empathy is personal, not proportional. It is a flaw in our moral intuition, where intimacy trumps scale. We will move heaven and earth for the person in front of us, while a million faceless souls remain a concept we can intellectually grieve, but never truly feel. The IKEA effect. You spend an afternoon assembling a wobbly, slightly lopsided bookshelf from a flat-pack box. When you're done, you don't see its flaws. You see a testament to your effort. You value it more than a sturdier, better-made shelf you could have bought pre-assembled. This is the IKEA effect. It's a cognitive bias in which consumers place a disproportionately high value on products they partially created. The labor you invest, the time, the frustration, the focus, becomes part of the product's value. Your sweat equity is literally woven into the fiberboard. This is why DIY projects are so cherished and why homemade gifts carry such weight. The IKEA effect reveals that value is not inherent in an object alone. It is co-created by the effort we pour into it. Labor, indeed, is a form of love. The law of Jant. In certain societies, particularly in Scandinavia, there exists an unspoken but powerful social code. It can be summarized in 10 commandments, all variations of a single theme. Don't think you're anyone special. Don't think you are smarter, better, or more important than us. This is the law of Jant. It is a cultural force that enforces group harmony and equality by suppressing individual achievement and ambition. The tall poppy is cut down, boasting is taboo, and standing out is seen as a social transgression. While it can foster a strong sense of community and minimize envy, it can also stifle innovation, ambition, and the unique expression of talent. It is a reminder that groups have powerful, often invisible, mechanisms for maintaining conformity, and that the price of collective comfort can sometimes be paid in individual potential. The McNamara fallacy. Named after the U.S. Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War, this fallacy occurs when decisions are based solely on quantitative metrics, ignoring all qualitative factors that are harder to measure. Body counts became the measure of winning the war, while unquantifiable factors like morale, public opinion, and the enemy's will to fight were ignored. This is the McNamara fallacy. It is a four-step process. Measure whatever can be easily measured. Disregard what cannot be easily measured. Presume that what cannot be measured is not important. Presume that what cannot be measured does not exist. We see this when schools teach to standardize tests, when companies optimize for quarterly profits over long-term health, and when we judge our lives by social media likes. It is the mistake of mistaking the map for the territory, and in doing so, losing sight of the entire landscape of meaning. The neglect of probability. You are far more likely to be killed driving to the airport than in a plane crash. Yet, many people white-knuckle their way through a flight while texting on the highway. This is the neglect of probability. It is a cognitive bias where we completely disregard the probability of an event when making a decision under uncertainty and focus only on the possible outcome. We react to the emotional magnitude of a risk, not its statistical likelihood. A 1% chance of a catastrophic event feels more threatening than a 99% chance of a minor inconvenience. Our ancient brain, wired for stories and vivid threats, is ill-equipped to process cold statistics. Fear Not Math is the true author of our risk assessment. The not invented here bias. A brilliant, cost-effective solution is presented to a company, but it was developed by an outside team. It is rejected. Later, the company invests heavily to develop an inferior, internally created version of the same idea. This is the not invented here, NIH bias. It is a social, corporate, and institutional bias against ideas, products, or research that originate from outside the group. There is an irrational preference for what is internally generated, a form of intellectual tribalism. This bias stems from pride, a desire for control, or a misguided sense of self-sufficiency. It causes organizations to waste resources, reject innovation, and stagnate. It is a powerful reminder that ego and territory can be the fiercest enemies of progress and truth. The planning fallacy's companion. The planning fallacy makes us underestimate how long things will take, but it has a constant companion, the optimism bias, which makes us overestimate how well things will go. We imagine the best-case scenario for outcomes, just as we imagine the fastest timeline. We believe the new software will revolutionize our workflow, not create new problems. We imagine the diet will bring boundless energy, not cravings and fatigue. We consistently overestimate benefits and underestimate costs. The future, in our minds, is a polished, simplified version of reality, stripped of friction, setbacks, and unintended consequences. This companion bias ensures that our plans are not just late, but also disappointingly mundane compared to the bright, flawless future we had envisioned. The pro-innovation bias. A new technology emerges and we rush to adopt it, convinced it will solve our problems. We assume that because something is new, it is inherently better. Progress, we believe, is a linear path of improvement. This is the pro-innovation bias. It's the tendency to have an excessive optimism towards an invention or innovation, while overlooking its limitations and potential negative consequences. We see this in the uncritical embrace of social media, certain pharmaceuticals, or disruptive business models. We forget that old solutions often have a wisdom born of longevity, and that not every problem needs a technological fix. Sometimes, the most profound progress is realizing that nothing needed to be fixed at all. Innovation is a tool, not a virtue, and its value is determined by its use, not its novelty. The salience bias. A single, heartbreaking news story about a shark attack can make you afraid to swim in the ocean, despite the statistical rarity of such an event. A vivid, personal anecdote from a friend about a bad experience with a product can outweigh pages of positive reviews. This is the salience bias. Our attention is drawn to what is most noticeable, emotionally charged, or personally relevant. Salient information, the dramatic, the concrete, the anecdotal, dominates our thinking and drowns out more abstract, but often more important statistical realities. Emotion has a louder voice than evidence. Our risk assessment, our judgments, and our fears are shaped not by the most accurate information, but by the information that stands out the most. The shared information bias. A team meets to solve a problem. They spend most of their time discussing facts and opinions that everyone in the room already knows. The unique knowledge that each member holds, the specialized insights that could lead to a breakthrough, remains unspoken, lost in the comfort of common ground. This is the shared information bias. It is the tendency for group members to discuss information that everyone is already familiar with, rather than sharing unique information that only some members know. This happens because common knowledge is socially rewarding. It builds consensus and feels safe. But it makes groups less intelligent than the sum of their parts. True collaboration requires the difficult work of dredging up the uncommon, the dissenting, and the unknown, even when it disrupts the harmony of the room. The status quo bias. You stick with your current bank, your current job, your current routine, not because they are optimal, but because they are what you know. Changing requires energy and justification. Staying the same is the default, the path of least resistance. This is the status quo bias. It is a powerful emotional preference for the current state of affairs. The present situation is taken as a reference point, and any change from that baseline is perceived as a loss. This bias explains why we remain in unsatisfactory relationships, why we fail to switch to better financial plans, and why societal change is so slow. Inertia is not just a physical law, it is the strongest force in human psychology. We would rather be comfortably wrong than uncomfortably right. The ultimate truth. As we reach the end of this exploration, a final meta-truth emerges. For every universal principle we have examined, from the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon to the status quo bias, an exception can be found. Every pattern, no matter how robust, eventually breaks. The universe is too complex, too nuanced for any single rule to hold absolute dominion. The only true constant is change itself. The only real certainty is the presence of uncertainty. And in a final, humbling twist, we must acknowledge that even these statements are probably incomplete, flawed, or wrong in ways we cannot yet see. This is not a cause for despair, but for wonder. The ultimate truth is that the search for truth never ends. It is a perpetual, beautiful unfolding, a reminder that the greatest wisdom lies in knowing the limits of our own knowledge, and in remaining forever curious about the mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding.